If a marriage counselor could see my browser history at 3 in the morning, they'd call 911. Not because of what I was looking at, but because of what I was planning to do about it. My name is Aidan Locke, and I used to think I was married to the woman of my dreams. Turns out, I was just living in her nightmare. The house was dead quiet, except for the hum of my computer and the occasional creak of our 15-year-old Colonial settling into another New England winter night. Tessa was supposed to be in Chicago for a 3-day advertising conference, but something had been nagging at me all week. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, or call it the fact that my wife had suddenly developed an interest in yoga pants and expensive lingerie. I'd been running my IT consulting firm from our home office for the past 2 years. Ever since the corporate world decided that 42 was too old and too expensive. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same skills that got me fired were now about to save my marriage or destroy it. Probably the latter. The front door clicked open at 3:17 a.m. Aiden, are you still up? Tessa's voice carried that particular strain of someone caught off guard. She wasn't supposed to be home until Friday. I minimized my browser window and swiveled around in my chair, putting on my best concerned husband face. Hey, babe, you're back early. Everything okay? She appeared in the doorway, her usually perfect blonde hair slightly mussed. Her business suit wrinkled in ways that suggested it had spent time on a hotel room floor, but not alone. The conference wrapped up early, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Didn't want to waste money on another hotel night. That's my practical wife, I said, noting the way she touched her neck. There was something there she didn't want me to see. How was the presentation? Fine. Great, actually. We might land the Morrison account. She was already backing toward the hallway. I'm exhausted. Going to shower and crash. I watched her go, cataloging every detail. The slight limp in her left leg. The way she carried her purse clutched against her chest instead of letting it hang from her shoulder. The faint smell of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. 20 minutes later, I heard the shower running. That's when I made the mistake that would change everything. Or maybe it was the smartest thing I'd ever done. The jury's still out. Tessa had left her purse on the kitchen counter. She never did that. Tessa was obsessive about her purse, treating it like Fort Knox with a zipper. But there it sat, practically begging for attention. Inside, buried under the usual debris of receipts, gum, and makeup, I found something that made my blood run cold. A second phone, a cheap burner that was still warm from recent use. The lock screen showed 3 missed calls from C and a text preview that made my stomach drop. Can't wait to see you again. You drive me crazy when you... I didn't need to read the rest. My hands were shaking as I swiped up. And miracle of miracles, she'd forgotten to lock it. What I found in that phone over the next 10 minutes destroyed 15 years of marriage and rebuilt me into someone I didn't recognize. Photos that would make a porn star blush. Text conversations that detailed every intimate moment of a 3-month affair with someone named Carter Voss. Hotel receipts, restaurant reservations, even a goddamn playlist titled Our Songs. But it was the conversation thread from earlier that evening that really got my attention. Carter. When are you going to tell him? Tessa. Soon. He's so pathetic lately. Always moping around the house. Carter. You deserve better than some washed-up tech guy. Tessa. I know, he's gotten so weak. Used to have some fight in him. Carter. Can't wait to have you all to myself, Tessa. Just be patient. I need to figure out how to get the most out of the divorce. I sat there in my kitchen at 4 a.m., reading about my wife's exit strategy while she showered off another man's touch, and something fundamental shifted inside me. The hurt was there, sure, but underneath it was something colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Weak? We'll see about that. I carefully placed the phone back exactly where I'd found it, erased my digital footprints, and went back to my office. Sleep was out of the question. I had planning to do. The next morning, Tessa bounced into the kitchen like nothing had happened, humming one of the songs from her little love playlist. She'd covered the hickey on her neck with makeup, but I knew exactly where to look now. You seem happy, I said, not looking up from my coffee. Just excited about the Morrison account. This could be huge for the agency. She poured herself orange juice and perched on the stool across from me. What are your plans today? Oh, the usual. Might stop by Mick's garage later. Need to get the oil changed. Mm-hmm. She was already scrolling through her real phone, probably coordinating with Carter for their next rendezvous. That's when I heard voices in the living room. Tessa's best friend Riley had let herself in as usual. Riley Chen was one of those women who treated other people's homes like her personal hangout spot, and normally it annoyed me. Today I was grateful for the opportunity to gather intelligence. Tessa, honey, you in here? Riley's voice carried that particular tone of someone bursting with gossip. Kitchen, Tessa called back, and I saw her face light up in a way it hadn't for me in months. Riley swept in wearing her usual uniform of yoga pants and oversized sweater, carrying a coffee cup that probably cost more than most people's lunch. She was Tessa's enabler, the friend who always encouraged her worst impulses and justified her selfish behavior. Oh, hi, Aiden, she said, like she'd just noticed I was there. How's the computer stuff going? Thriving, I said dryly. Nothing like being talked down to before 9 a.m. to really get the day started. Riley laughed that fake laugh she always used when she didn't get the joke, then turned back to Tessa. So, how did it go? I pretended to be absorbed in my laptop, while my wife and her best friend discussed my marriage's funeral arrangements in coded language. Better than expected, Tessa said. He's completely clueless. Are you sure? I mean, Aiden's always been pretty sharp. Trust me, he's gotten soft. Spends all day in that office feeling sorry for himself. He doesn't have the spine for a real fight anymore. I kept typing, letting them think I was lost in work while they planned my destruction. It was educational, listening to 15 years of marriage get dissected like a biology experiment. What about the money? Riley asked. That's the tricky part. Most of our assets are tied up in his business and the house. But I've been documenting everything. Late nights, mood swings, drinking. Is he drinking? Not yet, but he will be. They both laughed at that, and I had to grip my coffee mug to keep from reacting. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. After Riley left, Tessa kissed me goodbye like a devoted wife. Have a good day, honey. Love you. Love you too, I said, and meant it in ways she'd never understand. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I got to work. Mick's garage was exactly the kind of place where a man could disappear for hours and emerge with solutions to problems he didn't know he had. Mick Torino had been my friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world instead of just trying to survive it. He'd chosen grease and carburetors. I'd chosen code and keyboards. We'd both ended up divorced, though his had been amicable. You look like shit, he said by way of greeting as I walked into his shop. Thanks, I feel worse. Mick was under the hood of a '98 Camaro, but I could see his grin. Woman trouble? The worst kind. The kind where you don't see it coming until it runs you over. He rolled out from under the car and wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. Mick was built like a linebacker who'd discovered beer, but his hands were surgeon steady when it came to engines. Tessa? Shit. I'm sorry, man. What do you need? That was Mick. No questions, no judgment, just loyalty and a willingness to help a friend bury the bodies, metaphorically speaking. I need to know what she's really up to, and I need it to be legal. How legal? Legal enough that I don't end up in jail, but flexible enough that she ends up regretting every choice that led her here. Mick's grin widened. Now you're talking my language. An hour later, we had a plan. Nothing fancy, nothing that would hold up in a spy movie, but practical and effective. A small GPS tracker for her car, courtesy of a device designed to help parents monitor teenage drivers. A voice-activated recorder that looked like a phone charger. Basic surveillance that any concerned husband might use. You sure about this? Mick asked as we installed the GPS tracker in Tessa's wheel well. Once you go down this road, there's no going back to pretending everything's fine. Everything stopped being fine the moment she decided I was disposable. That afternoon, I followed the GPS signal to the Riverside Motel, a place that advertised hourly rates and asked no questions. Tessa's car was parked next to a black BMW that I now knew belonged to Carter Voss. I'd done my research on Carter. 43 years old, senior partner at Hartwell and Associates, the advertising agency where Tessa worked. Married to a woman named Patricia who came from old Boston money. 2 kids in private school. A mortgage on a house in Wellesley that cost more than most people made in 5 years. He had everything to lose. That made him dangerous, but it also made him vulnerable. I sat in my car across the street, watching the motel room window and taking pictures with the telephoto lens I'd borrowed from my neighbor who thought I was getting into bird watching. The irony wasn't lost on me. They emerged 2 hours later, Tessa looking flushed and satisfied in a way I hadn't seen in years. Carter was already on his phone, probably lying to his wife about being stuck in traffic. I followed them to separate cars, watched them drive away in different directions, and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest where hurt used to live. That evening, Tessa came home with takeout from our favorite Thai place and a smile that felt like a knife between my ribs. Thought we could have a nice dinner together, she said, unpacking containers of pad thai and spring rolls. We haven't been spending enough time together lately. That's thoughtful, I said, helping her set the table. How was work? Busy. Carter's been pushing everyone hard on the Morrison pitch. Carter Voss? She paused just for a second, but I caught it. You know Carter. Just from your stories. Sounds like a real go-getter. He is. Very driven. Patricia's lucky to have him. The casual mention of his wife's name was a nice touch. It suggested intimate knowledge, while maintaining plausible deniability. Tessa had always been good at lying. I just hadn't been paying attention. We ate dinner and talked about safe topics. The weather, the neighbors, her mother's upcoming visit. She even laughed at my jokes, something she hadn't done in months. It was like being married to a ghost of our former happiness. After dinner, she curled up next to me on the couch to watch Netflix, her head on my shoulder, her hand on my chest, playing the part of the loving wife, while probably thinking about Carter's hands on her body. I love you, she whispered during a commercial break. I love you too, I replied, and wondered if she could hear the difference in how I meant it now. The next morning brought a breakthrough. The voice recorder I'd hidden in her car had captured a phone conversation that made my blood boil and my resolve crystallize. Riley, it's me. Are you alone? Yeah, what's up? I think Aiden might be getting suspicious. He asked about Carter yesterday. Shit. What did you tell him? Nothing specific, but he had this look. You know how he gets when he's analyzing something. Maybe you should cool it for a while. I can't. Carter's talking about leaving Patricia. This could be my chance to get out before Aiden figures out what's happening. What about the plan? That's why I'm calling. I need you to help me document some things. If this goes sideways, I need evidence that he's been emotionally abusive. Has he been? Not exactly, but he's been distant and moody. We can work with that. Tessa, that's survival, Riley. I'm not going to end up with nothing because I was too nice to protect myself. I sat in my office, listening to my wife plot my destruction with the same clinical detachment she might use to plan a marketing campaign. The hurt was still there, but it was buried now under layers of anger and determination. She wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd picked the wrong opponent. I spent the rest of the morning researching Carter Voss more thoroughly. Social media, professional history, financial records that were publicly available. By lunch, I had a complete picture of a man who'd built his life on other people's money and other people's trust. More importantly, I'd found his weakness. Carter Voss wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was embezzling from his clients. The Hartwell and Associates annual client appreciation party was being held at the Marriott downtown, and I had an invitation. Not because Tessa had invited me, she'd made it clear that spouses weren't expected, but because I'd called the agency directly and spoken to Shannon Murphy in HR. Of course, Mr. Locke can attend, Shannon had said when I'd called that morning. Tessa talks about you all the time. We'd love to meet the man behind our star account manager. What Tessa didn't know was that I'd been having regular conversations with Shannon for the past week. Not about the affair, I wasn't ready to play that card yet, but about business opportunities. My IT consulting firm had been looking to expand, and advertising agencies always needed technology solutions. I arrived at the party fashionably late, wearing my best suit and carrying a leather portfolio that suggested I was someone worth talking to. The ballroom was full of the kind of people who measured their worth in client billings and corner offices. I spotted Tessa immediately. She was holding court near the bar, laughing at something Carter was saying while his wife Patricia stood beside him looking bored. Tessa looked stunning in a black cocktail dress that I'd never seen before, her hair swept up in a way that showed off the earrings Carter had probably bought her. Aiden, there you are! I turned to find Shannon Murphy approaching with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. Shannon was in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd survived every corporate trend and office revolution of the past 3 decades. Shannon, thanks for making this possible. My pleasure. Come on, let me introduce you around. For the next hour, Shannon guided me through the room, introducing me to partners and account managers and creative directors. I was charming, professional, and just successful enough to be interesting without being threatening. I collected business cards and made connections, all while keeping one eye on my wife and her lover. They were being careful, maintaining professional distance in public while their eyes did all the talking. But I could see the tension between them. The way Carter's hand lingered on Tessa's shoulder when he handed her a drink, the way she leaned into him when she laughed. So, you're Tessa's husband, a voice said behind me. I turned to find Carter Voss himself, extending a hand with the kind of smile that probably closed million-dollar deals. He was handsome in a generic way, with perfectly styled hair and a tan that came from expensive vacations. Guilty as charged, I said, shaking his hand with just enough pressure to suggest I wasn't intimidated. And you're Carter. Tessa's mentioned you. All good things, I hope. His smile didn't waver, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Oh, definitely. She says you're very hands-on with your management style. Carter's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I believe in being directly involved with my team's success. I bet you do. We stood there for a moment, two men who knew exactly what the other was thinking, but couldn't say it out loud. Carter was trying to read me, to figure out how much I knew and how much of a threat I posed. I let him wonder. Aiden! Tessa appeared at my elbow, her voice pitched with surprise and something that might have been panic. What are you doing here? Shannon invited me. Thought it would be good to put faces to names. I kissed her cheek, noting how she stiffened at the contact. You look beautiful tonight. Thank you. She was scanning the room, probably trying to figure out how to manage this unexpected complication. I didn't know you were coming. Surprise, I said mildly. Carter cleared his throat. Well, I should get back to Patricia. Nice meeting you, Aiden. Likewise. As he walked away, I could feel Tessa's tension radiating like heat. She was trapped between her public role as my loving wife and her private role as Carter's mistress, and the cognitive dissonance was eating her alive. How long are you staying? She asked. Oh, I thought I'd make a night of it. Shannon's been introducing me around. A lot of potential business opportunities here. That got her attention. Business opportunities? IT consulting. Amazing how many companies need help with their digital infrastructure. I smiled at her. Who knows? Maybe I'll end up working with your agency. The color drained from her face as she realized what that would mean. Having me around the office, building relationships with her colleagues, being in a position to observe her behavior with Carter. That's great, honey. Isn't it? The evening continued, and I played the part of the devoted husband while gathering intelligence. I learned that Carter had a reputation for being aggressive with female employees. I discovered that he'd been married to Patricia for 12 years, but had a history of affairs. Most importantly, I confirmed my suspicions about his financial improprieties. Derek Walsh, a nervous middle manager with a drinking problem, was more than happy to complain about Carter's expense account irregularities after a few whiskeys. Guy charges everything to client accounts, Derek slurred. Hotels, dinners, even personal travel. Patricia thinks he's working late, but he's living it up on other people's money. That's pretty serious, I said, refilling his glass. Tell me about it. But who's going to report it? Guy's got connections all the way up to the board. What about documentation? Oh, there's documentation. HR's got files on him going back years. Shannon's been building a case, but She needs someone with authority to back her up. Interesting. Very interesting. As the evening wound down, I found myself in conversation with Patricia Voss. She was an elegant woman in her early 40s, with a kind of understated style that came from old money and good breeding. She also had the hollow look of someone who'd been pretending not to notice her husband's infidelities for years. "You're Tessa's husband," she said, joining me at the bar, "and you're Carter's wife." Guilty. She ordered a martini with the precision of someone who'd had plenty of practice. "Tessa's lovely. Carter speaks very highly of her work." "I'm sure he does." Patricia studied me over her glass. "You know, don't you?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "Know what?" "About Carter and Tessa." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. I considered lying, but something in her eyes told me she'd see right through it. "How long have you known?" "About Tessa specifically, a few weeks. About Carter in general, years." She took a sip of her martini. "He's not as careful as he thinks he is." "Why do you stay?" "The same reason you haven't confronted them yet. Because once you acknowledge it out loud, you have to do something about it." She looked across the room where Carter was saying goodbye to clients. "But we both know that moment's coming, don't we?" "Yeah," I said. "I think it is." She finished her drink and set the glass on the bar. "When it does, call me. I have some things that might interest you." She handed me her business card and walked away, leaving me with the distinct impression that Carter Voss had just made a very dangerous enemy. The ride home was tense. Tessa stared out the window while I drove, both of us processing the evening's implications. "You seem to enjoy yourself tonight," she said finally. I did. Met some interesting people. Made some valuable connections. Including Patricia Voss? She seems nice. Very perceptive. Tessa's hands clenched in her lap. "What did you two talk about?" "Business, family, the usual party conversation." I glanced at her. "Why?" "No reason. She asks a lot of questions." "Does she?" We drove the rest of the way home in silence, but I could practically hear the gears turning in Tessa's head. She was starting to realize that her carefully constructed double life was developing cracks, and she was trying to figure out how to manage the damage. What she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead of her. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in my office, reviewing the information Patricia Voss had emailed me overnight when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Carter's BMW in my driveway. This should be interesting. Carter was standing on my front porch in a $1,000 suit, looking like a man who'd spent the night staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping. His usual confident demeanor had been replaced by something harder, more desperate. "Carter," I said, opening the door. "This is unexpected. We need to talk." "Do we? About what?" He pushed past me into the house without being invited, which told me everything I needed to know about his state of mind. Desperate men made stupid choices, and stupid choices created opportunities. "Where's Tessa?" "At work. You know, that place where she's supposed to be instead of in motel rooms with her boss." That stopped him cold. He turned to face me, and I could see him recalculating everything he thought he knew about the situation. "So you do know." "I know a lot of things, Carter. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" He was trying to read me, to figure out if I was a threat or just a cuckolded husband looking for closure. I let him wonder while I poured myself a cup of coffee and didn't offer him one. "Look, Aiden, I know this is complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "My wife is fucking her boss, and they're planning to divorce me while documenting fake abuse charges. Complicated doesn't begin to cover it." His face went white. She told you about..." "She didn't tell me anything. I found out the old-fashioned way. I paid attention." Carter sat down heavily on my couch, looking like a man who'd just realized he was in quicksand. "What do you want?" "That's the wrong question, Carter. The right question is, what are you going to do to make this right?" I never meant for it to happen. It just... Save it. I don't care about your feelings or your justifications. I care about results. I sat down across from him, close enough that he couldn't avoid looking at me. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end it with Tessa. Today. You're going to tell her it was a mistake, that you're committed to your marriage, and that any future contact between you will be strictly professional. And if I don't, I smiled, and he flinched. Then Patricia gets a very detailed report about your extracurricular activities, including the financial improprieties that Derek Walsh was so happy to discuss last night. You son of a bitch. Probably. But I'm a son of a bitch who's got nothing left to lose, which makes me very dangerous. I leaned forward. You, on the other hand, have a wife with family money, 2 kids in private school, and a career that depends on other people's trust. How do you think this plays out if it becomes public? Carter stared at me for a long moment, then stood up abruptly. This isn't over. No, it's not. But it's about to be. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for several minutes, probably trying to figure out his next move. When he finally drove away, his tires squealed against the pavement. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mick. You need to get down here, now. What's wrong? That BMW you've been tracking just pulled into my lot. Guy looks pissed, and he's asking questions about you. I was there in 10 minutes. Carter's car was parked sideways across 2 spaces, and through the garage's open bay door, I could see him pacing back and forth, while Mick watched with the patient expression of a man who dealt with plenty of angry customers. Want to know what he's been telling you? Carter was saying as I walked in. And I told you, I don't discuss my customers' business with strangers, Mick replied calmly. I'm not a stranger, You're nobody, I said from the doorway, and you're trespassing. Carter spun around, his face flushed with anger and desperation. You think you're so smart, don't you? Following me around, digging into my business? I think I'm a man whose wife is cheating on him with an embezzling piece of shit who's too stupid to know when he's beaten. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I do. I'm dealing with a middle-aged man having a midlife crisis who thought he could destroy my marriage without consequences. I stepped closer. How's that working out for you? Carter's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought he might actually take a swing at me. Behind him, I could see Mick moving into position, ready to intervene if things got physical. You want to hit me, I said conversationally. Go ahead. Assault charges would look great on your record. That deflated him. Carter wasn't stupid, just desperate, and he knew that violence would only make his situation worse. This isn't over, he said again. Keep telling yourself that. He stormed out, and a few seconds later, we heard his BMW roar to life. But instead of leaving, he sat there, revving the engine, staring at the garage. Friend of yours? Mick asked dryly. My wife's boyfriend. He's having a bad day. Looks like he's about to have a worse one. Carter's car lurched forward, tires spinning, and shot out of the parking lot onto the main road. I had a bad feeling about where this was heading. Come on, I said to Mick. We're going for a ride. We followed Carter's BMW through the winding roads that led out of town, staying far enough back to avoid being obvious, but close enough to keep him in sight. He was driving erratically, taking corners too fast and riding the center line. Guy's gonna get himself killed, Mick muttered from the passenger seat, or someone else. Carter turned onto Old Mill Road, a narrow 2-lane that wound through the woods toward the lake. It was the kind of road that claimed a few cars every winter when drivers got overconfident on the ice. He's stopping, Mick said. Carter had pulled over at a scenic overlook that offered a view of the valley below. He got out of his car and started pacing again, talking on his phone with animated gestures. I parked 50 yards away and rolled down the windows so we could hear. Don't care what he says he knows, Carter was shouting into his phone. We stick to the plan. There was a pause, then, because if we don't, we both go down. Is that what you want? Another pause. Fine. But if this goes sideways, it's on you. He hung up and threw the phone against a tree, where it shattered into pieces. Then he stood there for a moment, staring out at the valley like a man contemplating jumping. Think he'll do it? Mick asked quietly. No, he's too selfish. I was right. After a few minutes, Carter walked back to his car and drove away, leaving us with more questions than answers. That evening, Tessa came home in tears. What's wrong? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. Carter ended it, she sobbed into my shoulder. He said it was a mistake, that he needs to focus on his marriage. I held her while she cried, stroking her hair and making soothing noises, all while feeling absolutely nothing. It was like comforting a stranger who happened to look like my wife. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it in ways she'd never understand. I thought he loved me, she whispered. Maybe he did, but love isn't always enough. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes red and mascara stained. How can you be so understanding about this? Because I love you, I said. And sometimes loving someone means forgiving them for things that nearly destroy you. It was a beautiful lie, delivered with perfect sincerity. Tessa believed it because she wanted to, because it allowed her to be the victim instead of the villain in her own story. What she didn't know was that I'd already started planning the next phase of my revenge. The storage unit Patricia Voss had rented was in an industrial complex on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people kept things they didn't want found. She'd given me the access code and told me to come alone, which should have been a red flag but wasn't. I was beyond caring about red flags. Inside the unit, I found 12 years' worth of Carter's dirty laundry, meticulously documented and organized in banker's boxes. Patricia had been busy. Financial records showing systematic embezzlement from client accounts. Photographs of Carter with various women over the years, including some I recognized from the agency party. Email printouts detailing his affairs, his lies, and his increasingly desperate attempts to cover his tracks. But the real treasure was in the last box, recordings. Patricia had been secretly recording Carter's phone conversations for months, using an app that automatically captured and stored every call. The man had been stupid enough to conduct his criminal activities on a phone his wife had access to. I spent 3 hours in that storage unit, copying files and making notes, building a case that would destroy Carter Voss so completely that he'd never recover. It was thorough, methodical, and absolutely devastating. When I was done, I called Patricia. "Did you find what you needed?" she asked. "More than I needed. This is enough to put him in prison." "Good. When do we move?" "Soon. But I need to handle Tessa first." There was a pause. "Be careful, Aiden. Desperate people do unpredictable things." She was right, but I was past the point of being careful. I was in.